Ben Gvir's eyes are more on the West Bank. And you have heard Smotrich himself, which he was appointed by Netanyahu as the landlord of the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, saying that by the year 2025, that is in a few weeks' time, Israel will annex the West Bank. And what is happening in the West Bank as we speak, in terms of the invasions, the land confiscation, the deliberate attempts at destroying our national structures, including the Palestinian government, withholding our funds, destroying our banking sector, are all within a policy of doing something similar in the West Bank. And thirdly, that while in the last 13, 14 months, this has been happening, we need to remind the world and remind ourselves that this isn't about the last 13 months, Louise. The same has been happening over 100 years. Because our cause, our issue is that of having been on an extermination path by those who have argued 100 years ago that this is a land without a people. This is a land without a people. For those who have argued that we never existed, and for that ideology to be implemented, to materialize, we needed to be gone. And since then, a campaign of extermination after a campaign of extermination has been relentless, Louise, relentless. And I am the son of the Nakba. I was born in a refugee camp in Rafah, to the very south of Gaza, in the Shabura refugee camp. And as a son of Nakba, as a product of Nakba, I know exactly what the Zionist militias did to our people, to my people in 1947 to 1948. The mass expulsion of two-thirds of the Palestinian people. Therefore, what you have seen in the last 13, 14 months is what we have lived for almost 100 years. And I must remind everybody around this conversation that it all started also here in Britain. The infamous Balfour Declaration that also wrote in a piece of paper 67 words, the cancellation of an ancient nation, whereby we were turned into a non Jewish minorities that have no collective rights or national rights. And therefore, this is a long journey. This is a people struggle against supremacy, colonialism, racism, bigotry, against attempts at extermination and erasure, erasure. And we have been at it for 100 years. Now, here is the bad news, but let me share with you the good news. The good news is they have failed. They have failed 76 years ago, and look at Aida, and look at all of us everywhere, and they will fail today because the Palestinian people are rooted, very rooted. Palestine prides itself of being the cradle of civilizations, and this is not a claim. This is history, this is reality, this is facts. It's the birthplace of Christianity. It's the edge between and the bridge between East and West, and it is rather significant to all Abrahamic religions. And Palestine has been literally at the crossroads of civilizations, and the Palestinian people have been able to withstand, persevere because of the roots, because of the investment in our generations, because of the education. But also, as Louise started by saying a few hours ago, we all shared this inspiring moment of yet another big, huge march, massive march in the streets of London. And after 14 months, still people coming out in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, is such a message and such an indication that the public opinion of this country, the public opinion globally has changed, that people realize what is happening, that Israel has been unmasked. And I can attest to this. I can attest that what is happening is sustainable, is serious. It reminds us of a movement. It does have the making of a movement like that of South Africa. Also, and by the way, Louise, I keep saying this, that London has become the epicenter of global solidarity with the Palestinian people, thanks to you, Louise, thanks to the PSC, and thanks to the many organizations with the PSC who have kept the torch and who have kept the energy. But also, it is a reminder that London was also the epicenter of the anti apartheid movement of South Africa. So, what happened then in the 80s is happening now. The world have seen the incumbents and the youth actions and movement. And these things happen only once in a generation's time, or 2 or 3 generations. The last was the anti-Vietnam War. And we know that the youth are usually right. Whenever the youth start something, it goes and goes until they get the finish line. Finally, it took us a long time to utilize the legal track, to utilize the international legal system, the international judicial system. It took more than 10 years at the ICC, and before that to go to the UN and seek a state status. And still, the road is long. It will take us more, but we are there. We are going. We are on our way. You know the saying, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'm on my way. We are on our way to finally have a shot at accountability. That those war criminals are held accountable. That we see people like Netanyahu and Smotrich not at the helm of power, but behind bars. I know there is a lot of pushback. You've had many Western capitals saying that, oh, they might not comply. But now, every single government on earth, particularly those who are members of the ICC, will have to think 100 times before they receive war criminals like Netanyahu and Smotrich. There are other hopeful messages and indications. I don't want to go through the list, but the most important one is the heroic scenes that come from our doctors like Husam Abu Safiya and many other doctors, the heroic scenes from our teachers and our journalists. Only yesterday, London celebrated the Palestinian journalists, awarded them the highest awards because of the heroism and professionalism. And when we see our children having to convene press conferences because the international media is not in Palestine, when we see teachers still teaching our kids despite the genocide from the middle of the rubble, we know very well that we have sufficient energy, human energy, the energy of love to propel us and to take us to the finish line. And we all can see now, finally, a finish line emerging. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Husam, and thank you so much for taking the time to join this very important meeting. I know how busy you are, and obviously we send all of our solidarity to you, your family, but also to all of the Palestinian people who are suffering so much at this time. I think it's very important that you raise the issue of those Palestinians in the West Bank, which often isn't talked about at the moment, but we know the situation is very, very difficult for them. So thank you so much for being with us. I'll move to our next speaker. Just for our participants, if you do have a question, there is a Q&A box that you can pop that into. So if you think of questions as we're going along, you can pop those in and we'll try and take those at the end. So yes, please do try to make them concise so that it's easy for our panelists to respond to them. So Husam has already referred to our next speaker, Aida Touma Sliman, who is from the Hadash party. It's a real privilege to introduce her and to be here in a room with her. So you're very welcome, Aida, and we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Louise, and good evening to all. Thank you for holding this event, Liberation, and all the partners. I think it's very important, especially this year, to be gathering on the day or for the day of the international solidarity with the Palestinian people. I know that it has been 13 months that every day for you is a solidarity day with the Palestinian people. And we appreciate and evaluate highly this solidarity. We think that it's not only a message of solidarity, it's a message of strengthening the people who are fighting, who are struggling, and has been under attack for 13 months now in the most vicious war that maybe we have seen in the last two centuries. In my opinion, this genocidal war has revealed a lot of facts. I don't want to go into details. I think that Ambassador Husam has been very clear about how the Gazan people and the Palestinians in West Bank has been suffering in the last year, but also have shown and taught us many lessons about resilience and about how to keep themselves sending to the world messages of ambitious nation for liberation and stopping the occupation. I would be focusing more about the situation inside Israel and what we are facing in Israel. I have to say that people, because of the horrible year, tend to forget that for the first time in the history of Israel, since the Nakba, since its establishment till today, it is ruled by a whole right-wing government, and not only a right-wing government, but in my opinion, a fascist government that didn't happen in the past. And this is part of the real violent and horrible actions that we are facing, if it is in Gaza, if it is in the West Bank, and if it is the repression and oppression that we, as Palestinian citizens of Israel or Jewish democratic forces, anti occupation forces, are facing in the last 13 months. And we have been going through a real attack on us, trying to silence all the voices that are raised against the genocidal war, about the war crimes committed, and demanding to end and stop the genocide and to reach peace. I have to say, I'm talking to you from Akka, which is up in the north, very close to the Lebanese war. It has been only few days that we have been experiencing the ceasefire, and we were very happy to know that there was an agreement to stop the war on Lebanon. But we truly hope that we will hear also news very soon, although I'm not that optimistic, to have at least a ceasefire to stop a little bit the war on Gaza. I have to remind everybody is talking today about the willingness, or were shocked by the statements given by some ministers, especially Smotrich and Goldknopf and others, who were talking about settling in Gaza and building settlements in northern Gaza. I don't know, we seems to be have a very short memory. This coalition, Netanyahu's coalition, this government, in its agreements, it is written very clearly that they tend to expand and to do annexation in the West Bank. It is written very clearly that they tend and that was before the 7th of October. One of the laws that were legislated in the beginning of this cadency, meaning almost 2 years now, is to cancel what they call the disengagement in northern West Bank, meaning being able to go back and to build settlements in northern West Bank. It even goes a little bit further if we go back to 2018, when the state of the Knesset legislated the Jewish nation state law, which speaks very clearly about the great Israel land, and that it is the homeland of the Jews and only of the Jews, and there wouldn't be any right of self determination for any other nation on that land, meaning rejecting and banning any right of self determination of the Palestinian people. We have to remember also that that after the 7th October, there were a lot of legislation that show very clearly that these are the intentions of this government. This is a plan that was existing in the minds and in the drawers of the Israeli government way before the 7th of October. We said from the beginning that after 7th of October, we said that Netanyahu took all the sorrow and all the pain and all the revenge feelings that existed in the Israeli society after the 7th of October and turn it into a genocidal war that will accomplish his political plan. Netanyahu, that's true, don't want to stop the war because then he has to face his legal matters in the court for corruption, and he has to face interrogation committees that is demanded by the public in Israel for the what is called the failure on the 7th of October to defend the Israeli citizens. But he doesn't want also to stop the war, not only because a personal matter. He is a politician that is seeking more time to accomplish his plans and to put facts on the grounds that will create an obstacles, not only obstacles, but make it even impossible for any politicians who come after him to change the situation. We have to remember also that the UNRWA legislation banning any contact with the UNRWA by official Israelis or banning the UNRWA of acting in East Jerusalem, that's right. It is an attack on the international order and decisions and the agreements that Israel have signed in the past. But it is also mainly meant to liquidate and to finish the right of the refugees, the right of return. This government don't want even to speak about the Palestinian refugees, as they are adding numbers of new thousands and tens of thousands of new Palestinian refugees, but they don't want to get any kind of humanitarian aid for them, and that's why they are attacking the UNRWA. You have to understand that the discussion about the rule of the UNRWA started way before the 7th of October. The first bill that was submitted to the Knesset to ban the work of the UNRWA was done in 1996 even, not very new. And this discussion was going on until they found the right moment to do it. Why I'm saying this? Because if you look at what is happening also in West Bank and especially in Area C, you can understand that an ethnic cleansing of Palestinian is happening in northern Gaza and it is happening in the West Bank. More than 20 localities in Area C in the Jordanian Valley of Palestinians were kicked out of their lands and the lands were taken by the Israeli government. Tomorrow we have a finance committee meeting where I serve as a member. They are bringing in new shifts in the budget, including billions of shekels to be dedicated for the settlements. Ministers inside the Israeli cabinet are talking about settling or building settlements in Gaza. I'm afraid that with the news that are coming from the north in Syria and the attempts always to break the ceasefire in the north, that what Netanyahu had said on the 7th of October at night, when he said we will strike them in a way that they will never forget it for the next 50 years, and we will change the Middle East. That was his statement on the same horrible day on the 7th of October. That those are the plans. Israeli government have not abandoned the imperialist plans for this region. And
Aida,
for
can
my
you wind
regret,
up now, please? Can you just wind up now?
yes,
Thank you.
okay, I was about to do it.
Okay, good.
I think that your solidarity, the international solidarity movement, is very important at this point, because the attack on us inside Israel, those who are fighting these plans, those who are raising the voice, is also very hard. We are facing a huge amount of laws to disqualify us as members of parliament, to ban parties, and to attack everyone who is saying anything about what is going on. So we ask immediately to escalate even the international solidarity movement, not to confront the Israeli government only, which you are saying and revealing the crimes. We want you to confront your own governments. We want you to put pressure on your own governments to interfere in order to stop this war, recognize the Palestinian state, and to start acting to secure at least peace or quiet in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aida. That was really informative, and thank you for giving us all of that really important information. I think often people don't recognize the Palestinians in the 48 borders, and I think it's important that we hear your voices and the situation there as well. And obviously, our job is to continue to put pressure on our government here to take action about what is happening, and we have to really escalate our actions at the moment, given that the genocide is continuing at the rate that it is. So thank you so much, and hopefully you can stay with us, because there may be some questions for you. I've just spotted a question coming up in the chat, so hopefully you will be able to stay with us. Our next speaker is Brian Leighman. He's an MP from the Labour Party for Alloa and Grangemouth. I hope I pronounced that right. I always feel very bad when I do my pronunciations. Anyway, it's very good to have you, and we're looking forward to hear from you.
Thanks very much, Louise, and it was a fine effort, Alloa and Grangemouth. Thank you, and good evening to everyone. And firstly, I would like to also thank Liberation for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. It's an honour to be involved and to share a platform with all the speakers and all the comrades on the webinar. And as you, Louise, said at the start, and the ambassador also said, I believe that for the current situation in Palestine to be fully understood, then people need the historical context and to challenge the narrative of the timeline beginning on October 2023. And in doing that, and only then can the intense suffering that Palestinians collectively feel can be understood. And I think it's accurate to say that the international community has historically let Palestinians down, because the world has watched apartheid, colonialism, and ethnic cleansing take place, and has done so for decades. Going back to even earlier than mentioned previously, I think the late 19th century, Eastern European Jews facing anti-Semitism and persecution themselves came to Palestine. And this was the start of Judaism being used as the basis of a national identity and not a religion. And the project of settler colonialism was underway. And as the ambassador touched on earlier as well, for many British commentators and politicians, there is an uncomfortable truth that our country's imperial past has played a significant part in Palestinians being oppressed. The 1917 Balfour Declaration was the start and enabled a settler colonial project that promoted ethnic and religious supremacy. And when Britain promised a home for Jewish people, then it was in Palestine. And meaning, I think it was 94% of Palestine's indigenous people were denied the right to self-determination. And after that nearly 3 decades of British occupation, the collective trauma of the Nakba suffered by Palestinian people in 1948 led to 750,000 people being driven into exile and over 500 villages removed from the map. So it's fair to say that the displacement and persecution that we see today, they are not new things to happen to Palestinian people. And much more recently, in the 90s, the Oslo Peace Accords, which promised a right to self-determination, well, really, I think it's fair to say they weren't worth the paper that they were written on, because the violence, the displacement, the discrimination, and the overall dehumanization of the Palestinian people has continued. And Oslo did not tackle the fundamental right to return of the 1948 refugees. And it also did not question the status of Jewish settlements built on occupied Palestinian land. And it did not effectively address the borders of Palestine. And the Palestinian compromise of giving up the 78% of their land for the establishment of the 22% as a nation state with Jerusalem as the capital, then it just did not happen. And I think it's fair to say that Netanyahu's open hatred for Oslo has been obvious, and it's been consistent over the years. He expanded Israeli settlements on occupied Palestinian territory. His internationally considered illegal actions have always been at total odds with peace. And the expansion of Israeli settlements, of course, well, that equals the shrinking further of Palestine. So Netanyahu's policy of settlement expansion has absolutely remarkably diluted the possibility of achieving a Palestinian state. And after the Israeli betrayal of the Oslo Accords grew the international campaign of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And BDS has worked in isolating and highlighting the apartheid state historically of South Africa. So the idea of BDS was clear: to end the occupation and the oppression of Palestine, then BDS would need to be an effective vehicle to shatter through the ceiling of apartheid. And referring back to the struggle of the South African people, the anti-apartheid movement needed decades to really become the effective force that it was. And today we see BDS being made up of trade unions, which as a trade unionist, I'm immensely proud of, churches and grassroots campaigning organizations that are all calling on Israel to comply with international law. And this broad coalition of international solidarity is, of course, welcomed, but it doesn't get away from the fact that the relentless daily ethnic cleansing just hasn't stopped. And it shows the reality of what life is really like for Palestinians. The seizing of land and possessions, the violence, the oppression of culture and human rights, the imprisonment, it's all the sheer behavior of a settler colonialist apartheid regime. And I'm ashamed to say that Britain enables this. By the selling of arms to Israel, then we are complicit in allowing weapons that could be used to commit violations of international law. And when it comes to arms sales, I think Amnesty International this week said that there can be no loopholes, there can be no limitations. And frankly, it's not just on arms sales that the UK government have questions to answer. Exactly what has our role been in flying surveillance drones and aircraft over Gaza? Has British Army bases on foreign shores, such as Cyprus, been used as staging flights to Israel? And last week in Parliament, I'm still waiting on the answer. Last week I submitted written questions to the government. I'm waiting on answers to how many applications for exemption to fly over the UK with munitions of war have been made by Israel, and for Israel to be their destination, and whether the F-35 components were sent from RAF Markham to Israel between October 2023 and August 2024. And overall, the international community, and especially the UK and US in November and December United Nations Security Council presidencies, have to do an awful lot more. And obviously tonight being the 30th of November, it looks like the UK, to be frank, has failed. The truth is that the feeble words and statements of condemnation of Israel's actions, they don't account for anything really, because there's no difference being made. And the same applies in the well-meaning talk that politicians make of delivering a ceasefire. The time for talk for that has long since passed. A ceasefire must be delivered through pressure from Britain, the US, and the wider international community. And many political leaders have spoken at great length about an end to the killing, but ultimately have achieved nothing. It's international timidity, really, that is allowing Israel to manufacture a humanitarian aid situation that is beyond horrendous. And what we hear and what we see on the news is that vital aid is not getting through, whether that be food, water, medicine, equipment. They're not reaching the people that desperately need it. We're seeing, I think, the lowest level of aid in months. I'm sure there's 4 times less aid getting through to Gaza since July this year. And the inaction of the international community and many politicians has allowed this oppression and the collective trauma of the Palestinian people to continue and, I hate to say, become almost normalized and accepted. Politicians must stand up for Palestine. And I say to Labour colleagues that if we are to proudly hold up the principles that our party was founded on, that of being fiercely opposed to all forms of racism, prejudice, and bigotry, then we must speak up and we hold our government to account. And that must happen immediately. Reading from, I think, Médecins Sans Frontières, the chief emergency coordinator, she says that patient care is critically compromised as medical conditions linked to food, water, sanitation, and medicine are being hammered. And shelter, as we head into the winter time, shelter is completely inadequate. And this is a result of Israel's restrictions and blockade of aid getting through. I believe that supplies are so low that even some medical facilities are so overwhelmed that they are now having to be in that ridiculous position of turning patients away. And shortages are so bad that basic things like gauze and bandages have ran out, and generators are being stopped from getting through Israeli border control. And from a Scottish context, something that means an awful lot to me, it's beyond reproach that even a fire engine donated from the Fire Brigade Union of Scotland, fully loaded with life-saving equipment, has been impounded by Israeli authorities in Ashdod. And I'd like to put special mention and credit to the Fire Brigade Union of Scotland. For decades, they have stood in solidarity, shoulder to shoulder with their Palestinian counterparts and provided both equipment and training. And if all this is not the definition of crimes against humanity, then I honestly, frankly, I don't know what could be. There has to be a ceasefire. Humanitarian aid has to get through. It is long overdue. And there has to be an end to this cycle of oppression. And the only way a lasting peace can be achieved is with an end to apartheid. Nothing less than an end to the displacement of Palestinians and the repatriation of Palestinian refugees and the rebuilding of Palestine, and a Palestine that is free from being an actual free nation and free from being an open-air prison confined and shoehorned into a small area. And while the establishment of that nation is in no other nation's gift, the international community have a historical responsibility for Palestinian liberation and a recognized nation state that is free of the Nakba and the persecution that Palestinian people have felt for centuries. So, and that's my contribution. And again, I'd just like to say thanks very much for the opportunity of sharing.
Thanks so much, Brian. I mean, you covered so much in your time, and certainly the trade union movement has been central to supporting the Palestinian people. And I also saw the issue of the fire engine that had been stopped and was just appalled, really, that, you know, something that was going out to save lives was being withheld. But well done to the FPU for continuing their support. But we know we have huge support across the trade union movement in terms of supporting the Palestinian people, and we are very grateful for that in the movement. But also, you mentioned the boycott and divestment and sanctions campaign, and obviously that is a key call from our Palestinian partners and civil society in Palestine, and we have to listen to our people on the ground in Palestine and do what we can to support their calls. And we need to do more now than ever, really, around that. Okay, I'm going to go to our last speaker, and then hopefully we have got a question already, but please do, the rest of you that are on, think about questions you could ask from our brilliant speakers. But our last speaker is Behzad Navid from the International Department of the Tudeh Party of Iran. So I'm very pleased to welcome you and looking forward to hear from you. Thank you, Behzad.
Thank you, and I also want to thanks for the organizers to inviting me for this important event. So November 29th is commemorated as the International Day of Solidarity with Palestinian people. On this day in 1947, the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 181, known as the Partition Resolution. This resolution laid the foundation for a fully sovereign Palestinian state, which, despite facing immense pressure today, continues to be supported by the overwhelming majority of the UN General Assembly member countries. On this occasion, I expressed to the Party of Iran's unwavering solidarity with our Palestinians, brothers and sisters, in their ongoing struggle against apartheid, occupation, and injustice. 77 years after the adoption of Resolution 181, the racist and increasingly fascistic Israel regime continues to violate international laws and the UN resolutions. As a puppet of imperialism in the region, Israel openly expresses its intent to occupy all of Palestine, establish a greater Israel, and essentially redraw the region's geopolitical map, as other comrades mentioned in their speech. Over the past 18 months, the massacre of Palestinians, particularly in Gaza and the West Bank, along with the Palestinian people's steadfast resistance, has sparked a global movement in solidarity with Palestine. This unprecedented movement aims to end the support Israel receives from politicians and corporations, especially in the West. Official statistics report that approximately 44,000 people have been killed in Gaza, with over 103,000 injured, and of the disease, 70% are women and children. It's an atrocity that serves as a clear example of collective punishment of the Palestinian people. This genocide has led to tens of thousands of missing, injured, and disabled individuals, 2 million homeless, and the destruction of about 70% of residential areas, hospitals, and schools. The infrastructure in Gaza has completely collapsed, and there is a targeted policy to create famine among the remaining population. These horrors have shocked global public opinion, resulting in unprecedented protests across many capitals worldwide. The outrage stems from the recognition that these mass murders are crimes against humanity, facilitated by financial and military support of imperialist powers. According to Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, arms shipments to Israel have been consistently high since 2011. In the most recent conflict, the US supplied 70.2% of the weapons, followed by Germany 23.9% and Italy 5.9%. Reports also indicate that 90% of Gaza's population has been displaced, and Israel has ordered the evacuation of 84% of Gaza. The immense human toll and ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, coupled with the destruction of their land by Israel, expose the complicity of imperialist nations and NATO, The justification that Israel has the right to defend itself discredits their claims to uphold human rights and international law. Comrades and friends, as mentioned, Israel's fascist, ultranationalist, and apartheid-driven agenda aims to involve more regional countries in the conflict, particularly Iran. Prime Minister Netanyahu's recent comments on a ceasefire with Lebanon focused instead on the need to target Iran. This strategy threatens to eliminate any hope for Palestinian national self-determination while inflicting massive damage on Iran and its allies in Iraq, Yemen, and Syria. For the past 4 decades, the Middle East and wider region, from Afghanistan to Gaza, have been dangerously exposed to military and political interventions by US imperialism and its reactionary allies, with little effective resistance to protect the people. Palestine is a prime example of this. The phenomenon of political Islam, whether in the form of a state power or military groups, militia groups, has failed to oppose imperialism effectively. These forces do not pursue social justice, human democratic rights, or the economic and social emancipation of the masses. In fact, often oppose these progressive goals. The record of Iran's theocratic dictatorship is a glaring example of this failure. Recent developments in Syria have also worsened the situation, with rebel forces backed by Turkey and other Arab countries regaining control of at least half of Aleppo in a surprise offensive. In response to the escalating regional instability, the Islamic Republic of Iran has used provocative language to show its support for the so-called axis of resistance, including recent statements by Supreme Leader Khamenei calling for Netanyahu's execution following the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant for him. However, the primary goal of the Islamic Republic's foreign policy is the survival of the theocratic regime at any cost. The ruling clerical regime in Iran has a well-documented history of sowing division among Palestinian forces. Its reckless actions, which stoke regional tensions, reflect the internal existential crisis faced by the regime. Under increasing political and economical pressure, the Islamic Republic has escalated its repression of women, youth, and working people in recent months. This intensification of domestic oppression is intended to preserve the regime in the face of a mounting crisis of legitimacy and growing opposition at home. Ultimately, the path to peace and stability in the region lies in ending the Israeli occupation and the settlements in Arab territories, as managed by UN resolutions and in full adherence to international law. The establishment of an independent and fully sovereign Palestine state within the pre-June 1967 borders, with East Jerusalem as its capital, is the only way to secure a just and lasting peace. We unequivocally stand with the Palestinian people, whose courageous representatives we are proud to count among our long-term fraternal comrades in their righteous struggle for peace, justice, and national self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very informative contribution. And again, you have raised the issue of the settlements, and often people in the UK and other areas have no concept really of what a settlement is. These are not just small, a couple of buildings. These are huge complexes which are expanding massively over the Palestinian land and increasing on a daily basis. And I think that fact that they are illegal under international law is something which we should all be speaking out about much more, and which obviously their expansion does nothing to help towards a sort of peaceful settlement to the situation. Okay, thank you to all of our fabulous speakers. They were all amazing. We have got some questions in. So there are some to some of you directly. So I'm going to ask those questions. I'll ask those whether to you directly, if you could respond. And then obviously towards the end, I will give all of you a couple of minutes to come back on any of the things that have been raised. But our first question is to Aida. It says, what prospects are there for the left opposition to join a peace bloc in the next Israeli elections, including Meretz and Balad, who failed to secure representation in the present Knesset as their vote was below 3.25%? And that's from Robert Wilkinson, who's from the NEU in Oxfordshire.
Well, for my regret, I don't think that the upcoming election will be very soon. I think that Netanyahu has a very solid coalition that can last even till the end of this cadency, which means beginning of 2026. That means it leaves almost 2 years for the political arena to be shaped and reshaped again. As you would know, things in Israel are boiling, and there are more problems that can be seen in the political map. Meretz has already joined the Labour Party, and they are forming what is called the Democrats Party, led by Yair Golan. That is, for my regret, have been also supporting military actions and talking about the need to have even more extensive, sometimes, attacks. So nobody knows how they are going to act in the next election, and I don't think that they are going to be part of a solid peace camp, which I will mention very soon. Balad, we are trying nowadays to have a kind of dialogue between the different parties, mainly representing the Palestinian minority in Israel, but also Hadash as a Jewish Arab party. We are trying to bridge the gaps between us and see if there is a possibility to try to avoid any loss of voters. I have to say that any peace camp that do not take into consideration the Palestinian minority in Israel, which is the most solid group struggling for peace, will not be a true camp. Nowadays, we are facing legislations that try to disqualify under the claim of supporting terror the majority of the representation of the Palestinian minority and the anti-occupation democratic forces. You have seen that Comrade Ofer Kassif was suspended for another 6 months. In the past, I was suspended for 2 months from the Knesset. They are preparing this law to try to disqualify many of us in order to weaken the peace and anti-occupation camp. I have to say that this war also revealed that the vast majority of the so-called left and liberal parties or democratic parties to the left, center to the left in Israel have failed to act as a democratic, real democratic a group. And I'm saying anti-democrat, I'm saying democratic, and I'm not saying anti-occupation, because I don't think that they are anti-occupation. But at least because they were struggling, going demonstrations in the street under the name of protecting the democracy, they failed even to understand the basic line of there is no democracy as long there is occupation. And when you are occupying another people, you cannot have your own democracy. But I think that till now, the way it looks, the right wing is gaining more power. Even among the opposition, there are right wing like Lieberman and Gantz. So I don't have very good news in that part.
Thanks, Aida. That was a very comprehensive update, and it might not be good news, but we need to know the situation on the ground. So it's very good to have you here to update us. The next question is for you, Brian. It says, what are the dynamics and opportunities in the Parliamentary Labour Party in terms of progressing the struggle for the Palestinian people?
No, thank you, and thank you for the question. I think one of the first primary things that that we have to do is identify and call out really the disgraceful points that are trying to be made to justify arms sales. They're frankly ridiculous, and exposing the crimes and the motivations of the wider international arms industry, I think, is imperative, not just for Palestinians' benefit, but also I think for global security on a wider basis as well. But within certainly the Parliamentary Labour Party, there are many comrades and colleagues within there, names that I'm sure that people will be very, very familiar. And we're very happy to work with the independent group of MPs, as well as that. Obviously, as we saw in July, they got elected very much on a basis and a ticket of speaking up for Palestinian people and talking about the atrocities that are taking place there as well. And certainly from a Scottish perspective as well, I certainly know as well that there's cross-party support there with the Scottish National Party MPs as well. And I would pay tribute to a couple of them. They've been very, very outspoken in previous parliamentary terms, exactly on the absolutely ridiculous situation that is unfolding in Gaza. So there is cross-party cooperation there, but certainly within the Labour Party there is a movement, especially amongst the Socialist Campaign group of MPs, which I'm very proud to be a member of. So people such as John McDonnell, Richard Burgon, Imran Hussein, Nadia Whittam, Zara Sultana. We've all been very, very outspoken about exactly what's going on, and that solidarity will certainly continue. And I think we can see I unfortunately was obviously in the constituency today. I wasn't at the demonstration in London, but when you look at the turnout of people that are there, the public know exactly just how wrong and how immoral and how oppressive this is. And there is a wider coalition of people from across the political spectrum that appreciate that as well.
Thanks so much for that, Brian. Right, there's another question for you, Aida. Sorry, you seem to have been... So the first Trump presidency is widely regarded to have been a disaster as far as the Middle East is concerned. Obviously, particularly in relation to developments affecting Palestine and Iran, with a number of flashpoints that could have easily resulted in the outbreak of war. With Trump now back on the horizon, considering the views already expressed by the incoming administration, what challenges do you foresee on the road ahead, and how do you hope to navigate them? That is a very hard question. I apologize. That's not my question, but it is a very hard question.
Well, thank you, Louise. And I have to say that's a very hard question that is all the world is struggling with. All the world, I think, should be thinking what kind of challenges Trump's administration is going to bring to us. As you mentioned, the Biden administration wasn't a good administration to the Palestinian-Israeli issue, of course, not to the Middle East. I think that any American administration is going to represent, in general, the same policy of imperialism and interests in the Middle East. The only way that they vary is how to accomplish this. More brutal or a little bit less brutal, trying to navigate out of that. Trump's administration has already have shown its, I think, the unlimited support they are going to give to Netanyahu's government, to the Israeli government, the existing Israeli government, through also supporting all the attempts of annexation and settlements. It's very clear to us that the leech is going to be very how you say weak, open to, and they are going to give the Israeli government the possibility to implement whatsoever. I think that Trump, that was responsible for in many ways for the century, how you say it, deal, is going to continue in the same way, trying to bring the Arab world into more normalization, trying to avoid any real solution for the Palestinian issue. That is very dangerous. And we have to understand that without, not we as the Israeli society have to understand that that can lead to a real disaster for a long term, also for the Israeli society, not only for the Palestinian society. And all those who in the past tried to play it as part of the peace camp should wake up very soon and understand that without a real fight that we can give, revealing those plans and how this government is leading to establish even annexation in the West Bank and northern Gaza and settlements in northern Gaza. If the Israeli society is not going to wake up and to oppose all of that and try to influence, I think that that can be a disaster that we will face for the next years. I think that also we need to connect with the international solidarity movement, with the international community and parliaments, and to try to affect how the world and how the international community should be treating that. I think Europe has to have a different role at this moment, confronting this policy that will come from Trump's administration and Trump himself. Although I have to say that I know that Europe also is facing a lot of the problems that are connected to the rising right wing in different countries. But we have to keep a little bit of hope that we can continue to resist, and we will continue to resist. But there are going to be a lot of challenges, that's for sure.
Thanks, Aida. That's very informative. Okay, the next question is more general, so any of you, any of our speakers can come on this. It says, the call for a ban on arming Israel seems to be an effective form of putting pressure on the government's support of Israel. but what other specific demands do you think would be effective in exposing the complicity of Western leaders? So I suppose it's sort of broadening it out just from the banning of arms. So, Brian, do you have any thoughts on that?
I have to admit, Louise, I had a bit of a cheat and looked at the questions in the chat, and I was trying to answer a bit of that earlier on with what I said about international arms sales, because that is some, to reiterate that point, that is something that is a global cartel that in when we look at it in a wider political perspective, as well as it's creating death and destruction on various parts of the world, and also as well as even more gross inequality as well from a shareholder dividend point of view. So that is certainly something that collectively as an international community we need to tackle.
Thanks so much for that. I don't know if either of our other speakers want to come in on that, but Behzad, I don't know if you want to come in on the discussion we've just had about Trump, because obviously that will have an impact for you. So I don't know if there's anything you would want to add to what had already been said. Apologies, I should have raised that.
Definitely, I mean, Trump would be, as other comrades mentioned, it will making the situation very complicated, more complicated than it is. Definitely, Trump was basically orchestrating the changes in Israel based on the Dawood Agreement during his first term, and also he started to normalizing basically normalizing of the relationship between Arab countries and Israel at that time, and we saw certain improvements at that time, as well as with that policy. And as you remember, also he banned PLO organization from his activities in New York. So all of those, what he wanted to do based on the changes in the region, in the Middle East, Biden continued to do it, but in a minor basically way of things. As you see, for example, basically the escalation of the after 7th of October, the escalation of the war towards other Middle East countries was only because of the support which U.S. and other imperialists had. So this situation, in my mind, will continue. Definitely, it will be more serious, actually, sanctions coming for example, the countries that are not aligned with this policy in the region. And on the other side, the resistance of people actually regards this policy will be improving as well. So it is two sides. It's not only one side. We shouldn't only consider what Trump can do. On the other side, also the growing basically solidarity with Palestine, and also from different angles, especially from the unions. For example, Labor for Palestine in the North of America and in Canada and the US are growing, and it is a big impact, for example, and also the BDS, for example, Labor for Palestine, the unions actually they are very actively voting in favor of BDS in different sectors. So all of those are growing resistance against the policy of actually imperialism in the region. So we should see, it will be, I mean, it will be very tough years ahead of us. And that is important that we build a very vast united front of peace movement in the region. In our country, people don't want war. That is the main thing. They are in favor of peace. They experienced the war with Iraq, and one of the reasons that, for example, our party has been attacked, and actually, and the whole revolution, the main reason that the revolution was impacted, and the backwards forces could be able to take control of the situation was because of the war, and people suffered the war. Still, we are seeing the result of the war in many of the areas in our country. So people are not in favor of wars. So the objectivity for building a very vast peace movement is there, and we as progressive forces, we need to actually organize that movement. I will stop there.
No, thanks so much for that. This is the last question. It's to you, actually, again, Behzad. And then I'll give our three speakers a couple of minutes to sum up. So the question is, Israel is trying to expand the war in Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, as we've already seen, attacked, and serious damage has been done. Now it seems the Israel regime is targeting Iran. Why does Israel want to provoke a war with Iran, which is a big country with sizable military power? Do you think with a war with Iran, the US and UK and perhaps France will be joining the war against Iran, and the war could therefore become a regional war? And what then would happen? Could we see a further escalation into a further world war? That's a very big question. I didn't write the question. I'm just saying that. That wasn't my question.
Yes, yeah, 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 you're right, absolutely. Basically, I believe based on the growing the resistance against massacre and genocide Israel is doing, and based on international laws, Israel only hope is to actually to expand the war in the region, and in a way that could bring in the other imperialist forces, like definitely like the US. That only will happen if Iran enters the war, because then when Iran enters the war, it will give a good, basically, and very clearly, US mentioned that if Iran attacks Israel, we are going to defend Israel. So there is no question that they will enter the war. And based on all of the facts in the region, if it is like if the war starts in the region, controlling the war will be very, very difficult, because we need to understand that there are other powers in the region that plays a role. It's not only, for example, we say that US can do whatever they want. So it could basically expand the war very quickly in different angles, and it will be a disaster, especially based on the situation we see in Ukraine. It could basically create another actually war under control, not under control war in the region.
No, thank you very much for that. And that is something we've all got to be very aware of. Okay, a huge thank you to our speakers. I'm going to give them all a couple of minutes now just to sum up any final thoughts, anything they think that they didn't say earlier. And then we will be closing at 7:30, as we said. So I'll go back in sort of reverse order. So I think it's Aida, then Brian, then Behzad. I think is the order. Unfortunately, Husam has had to leave us, but so Aida, over to you to sum up from the evening. Thank you. Oh, you're muted, Aida.
Sorry. Because it's only 3 minutes, I will wrap up by saying hopefully that we will be able to stop this war very soon. And as I said, to liberate the Palestinian people from occupation and to liberate the Israeli people from being occupiers with all the corruption that occupation bring with. I have to say only that I think that it's very important for us also to have your solidarity against all the attack against the peace, the real peace anti-occupation camp in Israel that is struggling very hardly these days. All the atrocities of the police and the legislation, especially the legislations coming up against trying to disqualify candidates and to control the elections, the next election. If anybody needs more information, I can send it to you, especially in the British Parliament. I think it's very important to have a move on that. The big lie of the only democracy in the Middle East should be faced once and for all, and to reveal the real fact of at least what existed till today was ethnic democracy, and today it is a total apartheid.
Thank you so much, Aida, and I'm sure Brian and other parliamentarians will be willing to look at that and think about how we can, in the UK, take up that case around the true democracy for people. So, and we are now going to Brian, so he may be able to respond to that. So over to you, Brian.
Thanks very much, Louise, and thanks very much to Aida, and thanks very much for the opportunity once again of being involved this evening. It's been incredibly informative and educational, and I'd just like to thank all contributors and all comrades on the call. I'll be very brief in summing up my thoughts. Simply, what Britain must do is end our military and economic support of this extreme right-wing, brutalist and apartheid Israeli government. Netanyahu has done what he has done deliberately. He's basically been emboldened for many years. His actions today have been enabled by a passive international community, and he and others must face the full force of international justice for the crimes that they have committed. And frankly, for Britain to be silent is Britain to be complicit. And the acceptance of allowing prejudice and human rights abuses leads to the brutal apartheid system and genocide that we're seeing right now in Gaza. And it's incumbent on all British politicians to speak out and to demand an end to the killing, and to do everything for the creation of a free Palestine and for these criminals to face justice. And I feel the public anger and the frustration at politicians. I completely understand that, and people frankly are right to feel that way. They have been let down. But from my point of view, as a new MP, there are many comrades and colleagues in Parliament and in the wider trade union movement that we've spoken about tonight that are committed to standing up for Palestinian rights and for a free Palestine. And for Palestine, international solidarity is needed now more than ever, because without it and the appropriate international action that should be forthcoming, then the Nakba will continue. And that just absolutely cannot happen. So thanks again for tonight's involvement, and solidarity to everyone on the call.
Thanks so much, Brian, and thanks for your support. And we will continue to work with you in Parliament and with those parliamentarians who are willing to take forward this cause. So thank you for being here, and thank you for your words. So Behzad, it's over to you for the last comments of the evening.
And again, thanks for inviting me to the panel. I mean, obviously, the struggle against the illegal occupation of Palestine is a national liberation struggle. It is not a religious, for example, between Jews and Muslims. It's a struggle of the oppressed Palestinians against a 76-year of colonial occupation of their land. So we need to understand that. And it needs a vast majority of actually movements to support that. Unfortunately, the influence of progressive, especially left forces in the Middle East during the last 4 decades has been weakened. And one of the reasons was, especially in Palestine, what we know because of actually the Israeli regime to weaken the PLO, and also under the various manifestation of reactionary political Islam, which is happening in certain areas, including in our country as well, which cause a lot of problems for our people. That is what needs to be mentioned as well. And I want to express again that we only by having continuing basically solidarity with Palestinians, especially the way that we are doing during the last 17 months, this should be continued, and especially relying on the international apparatus like UN and other international like ICC, and the way that they are acting recently is important, and we need to basically continue that, and hopefully we could see some basically some openings and some brightness basically coming out of this struggle pretty soon. That is everybody's hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. I know Husam Zomlot has had to leave, but thank you to all of you for your fantastic contributions and for your responses to the questions that have been raised from our panelists. Obviously, you know, tonight is about the Palestinian people. That has to be at the heart of what we are fighting for. We have to continue to pursue a permanent ceasefire as soon as possible, but also for the ending of all arms sales to Israel. But we know that even when the war on Gaza ends, there will be much we need to do to continue to support the Palestinian people in their struggle for liberation. And we thank all of you for being here with us tonight. Particular thank you, obviously, to Liberation for organising this. Jamshid, do you want to come in? You've got your hand up, so you may want to say something just to sum up. But thank you so much, everyone, for being with us.
Thank you very much, Louise. Thank you very much, all speakers. I'm really very, very excited that we were able to have such a wonderful, informed panel of people from 4 parts of the world, and that was great. And thank to you, Louise, I know I've got to always refer to the role that PSC plays in Britain, has become a motivator of the solidarity with Palestine. We in Liberation are honored to work closely with Louise and with her union and also with PSC. We are all members of the PSC. We hope that to be able to continue this line of operation, this type of activities. I hope that not only for calling for an end to tragedy in Palestine, I hope that very soon we will see results. And I'm sure that the international community would come together and would bring this. But as far as liberation is concerned, thank you, thank you, thank you. And let's work together and make sure that future, that vision is coming through as soon as possible. Thank you very much, comrades. Have a good weekend and best wishes.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Bang. One.